So once again, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's so wonderful to have you here on Foundation Learning's webinar, Note-Taking and Study Strategies for Success. Before we begin formally, I'd love to just go over a few housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this webinar is recorded. You will receive a recording in your inbox within a day or two. Additionally, we're looking at running this webinar for about 45 minutes, half an hour of content, and then we always leave a Q&A portion towards the end where you actually get that time with our expert panelists to ask questions related to note-taking and study strategies for success. Excuse me. So I do encourage you to use the chat and the Q&A function as we go, and I'll make sure to get to as many questions in the end as possible. So before I pass it over to our panelists, we'll be doing introductions. We'll be speaking about the importance of effective note-taking techniques. We'll be discussing proven strategies for high school students, creating organized study schedules, and managing time efficiently, the do's and don'ts of effective studying, and of course that Q&A that we just mentioned. But before we hop into that, I just wanted to go over a little bit about who we are in case you don't know who Foundation Learning is and this is your first time joining us. I want to apologize. I see a little bit of a mistake on one of these slides. I believe our acceptance rate is now 98%, but as you can see, 96% at the time that this was created. So as I said, we are Foundation Learning, and we are a test and college prep team that have been helping students achieve their goal SAT and ACT scores and getting them into their top choice colleges for the last 15 years. At our core, Foundation Learning is here to democratize education around the globe, aiming to assist students from every background in their academic pursuits. We offer personalized free consultations via phone, video, or email, and you can. This allows you to individually speak with our team. Our academic directors are always ready and willing to help you through the process so that you don't have to navigate it alone, no matter where you are in your academic journey. Our goal is to maximize your chances of getting into college through digital, ACT, SAT, and subject tutoring, and help you get into the school of your dreams through a college application program. Your personal admissions counselor will support you through the entire college application process, from our college candidacy development program to our end-to-end application support. So whether you're in third grade, high school, or in college looking for credits, we are here to help. Our team of dedicated tutors and college admissions counselors come from top colleges and universities and have achieved high scores, and combined with our extensive teaching and tutoring backgrounds, they are some of the most experienced and proficient tutors and counselors in the nation. We tailor the tutoring plan to the individual student and do not offer a one-size-fits-all plan. Our tutors are trained to help students identify their strengths and weaknesses within the curriculum and test-taking process. We use this information to create a custom study and learning plan that focuses on strengthening the weakened areas. Our tutoring programs are rooted in a 5-module process designed to elevate students' understanding of the exam's content, structure, and of course, length. Our college prep and readiness program offers comprehensive counseling, including direct communication with admissions officers, early candidacy development, resume building, class scheduling, and assistance with securing summer programs and internships. Our counselors not only help create the perfect applicant, but also the perfect application. Our counselors provide guidance on major selection, creating a balanced school list, obtaining letters of recommendation, and securing scholarships using effective methods. We also help craft the perfect essay, which pulls out the best aspects of each one of our students through essay brainstorming, frameworking, and editing. This goes past the personal statement, as we also help with supplemental and merit scholarship essays. No matter the essay, we offer unlimited number of edits to secure perfection. Our goal is to make sure each student is confident in themselves and their test-taking abilities. We are here as cheerleaders to support our students all the way across the finish line. With that being said, I'd love to crack open tonight's webinar and pass it over to our wonderful panelists. So we have Pamela and Varna who will go ahead and introduce themselves and begin from here.
Hi everyone, I'm Pam. It's lovely to meet you all. Very excited to be speaking to you about studying and note-taking. I'm an admissions officer or former admissions officer from Harvard and Stanford. I went to Harvard as an undergrad and then went on to Stanford to get my PhD in neuroscience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain areas and how we can learn better, because those were some of the things that I looked at. I studied decision-making and reward circuitry in the brain. So we'll talk about how that is relevant to note-taking and effective studying.
Hi, everyone. My name is Varna. I am currently a third-year medical student in Chicago. Before this, I went to the University of Michigan for undergrad, and then I went to Columbia University for my Master of Public Health. And over that time, I did a lot of admissions work for Columbia, and then I'm also doing some right now at my current medical school. So a lot of experience with essay writing and like crafting your application and strategies to how to best present yourself and when it comes to applying to your dream schools. Also have spent a lot of time just being in school. And so doing a lot of note-taking, learning, that kind of thing. I am constantly trying new methodologies even now as a med student. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that as well.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of effective note-taking techniques and why effective note-taking matters. So there are three main reasons. The first being it helps you to retain information. So writing helps to encode information into long-term memory. So there are separate areas of the brain involved in listening, writing, and reading, which is why we often tell students that one of the best ways to actually take notes is to, I know we don't do much of this these days, but to actually be writing it down. So that involves the motor areas of the brain, as well as Wernicke's and Broca's, which is the ability to comprehend information and take it in and then to reproduce it. So all of this helps you to enhance your comprehension, because it not only helps you to organize your thoughts really logically, but you have to be able to retrieve it. So information retrieval is a really key aspect of learning, because it helps you to identify and clarify really complex concepts. I think anyone who's ever had to teach someone something understands how difficult it can be when you think you understand something, but then when you have to tell somebody else what that thing is, like I'm trying to do right now, it's very difficult to break down really complex concepts into simple, understandable information. So the third reason is that it helps you so much in terms of reviewing the information that you've been learning. Not only does it help you to create a summary for quick review. So I find that a lot of students think that they're studying when they're just reading through the text, but that's actually one of the most passive forms of learning, and it doesn't really help you to figure out the key points that you should be focusing on when you're studying.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk about the Cornell method. So this is just one way to essentially organize your thoughts when you're learning something actively within a lecture. So you essentially just take a piece of paper, you divide it up into three sections. You have one that says cues, so that will be your left-hand column. You would have notes, that's on the right side, and at the bottom of your page, that's your summary. And so the whole point essentially is that while you're actually during the class, you're going to be taking out information in the notes column, and afterwards, you're going to basically use the cue column and the summary column to essentially identify what are the main ideas, what are the main takeaways. And that's just a really good way to kind of be able to kind of test yourself on, okay, was I able to distill this information down to, like, three main points, for example.
So one of the most effective note-taking methods, I especially like this because it looks like the brain. It looks like dendrites in the brain. So dendrites are just branching mechanisms that your neurons use to reach out to each other. So if you look at these little circles and all these branches, imagine a cell trying to reach out and communicate with each other. So this mind mapping process starts with a central idea, and then you're branching out with all these related subtopics. So this one happens to be on proteins, and it breaks down all the different things you might want to know about proteins. So the benefits are that, as you can see, it's very visual. So if you're a visual learner, this is an amazing way to learn. It helps you to see connections a lot more easily, and also to understand the relationships between all the different concepts that you're learning about.
Great. And the outline method is actually something that I use all the time. So the whole point essentially is this would be something that you do to kind of summarize the lecture afterwards. So like after you like hear something or learn something, essentially you would try and distill everything onto like a single page or like maybe just front and back. So it's really an opportunity for you to learn to rephrase things that you were taught in the lecture, but in your own words, and to really bring it down to, okay, what are the, like, you know, the 3 or 4 key concepts. And it kind of allows you to piece things together. So it's kind of just taking the mind mapping, but instead putting it into like a bullet point kind of list form.
So your tips for better note taking are to be really concise. So you want to focus on the main ideas, the keywords, and the essential details. You don't have to write down every single thing that the teacher or the lecturer is saying. You want to use your own words to better understand and recall information. Like I was saying before, when you have to teach someone something and explain it in your own words, I think that you're, in that sense, relearning or learning the material a lot better. You want to use abbreviations and symbols. So if you ever looked at my notes there, I don't think anyone else would understand them, but I have a shorthand system because a lot of times you're writing really quickly. So it could just be summarizing or abbreviating the word with to a W. You can use arrows, stars. I have a lot of underlining and highlighting and boxing. I box important concepts. So whatever works for you in terms of highlighting the important information. And then as much as possible, one of the best ways, like I was saying, is to retrieve the information. So you want to review and revise. So you're not just rereading your notes, but you're trying to ask yourself and actively, we'll get into active learning next, but you're asking yourself and revisiting your notes and quizzing yourself, not only to reinforce your memory, but also to fill in any gaps and to clarify anything unclear, so you can go back and ask or look it up and to organize the content a lot better.
Great. So next we're going to get into proven study strategies for high school students. So we've kind of already talked about this one already, just by going through the other study strategies, but active learning is really, really important. So that doesn't mean just kind of passively listening to a lecture or even just copying over notes. I know a lot of times it's easy to find yourself just kind of writing word for word what you're seeing in the slides, but maybe writing it in a notebook. Even though, yeah, like it does help to write things with pen and paper, it only really makes an impact on your learning process if you're actually trying to synthesize that information in your own words. And the same thing with active learning is also kind of testing yourself, right? A lot of learning comes from like quizzing yourself throughout the process of learning, as opposed to just waiting until the end when you have to take that test. That's something that I am constantly doing is, for example, I use like flashcards that will take some of the content from a lecture and make it into a fill in the blank and try and test myself, and can I fill in these blanks on my own without consulting my notes. So that's like a really good way to kind of test yourself with active learning, or this is a great opportunity to study with a buddy or with a group and to quiz each.
Oh, Varna, you're muted.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I did not realize that. I was going on a whole spiel here. I'm so sorry. So what I was trying to say is that active learning is something that we've been talking about already throughout this presentation. So one of the things that's really important is it's so easy to find ourselves just passively copying over notes, right? Like you see something in the slides and you just rewrite it over with pen and paper. That's not sufficient in like actually synthesizing and retaining information. You have to really be interacting with that material. And the best way to interact with material is to quiz yourself. So whether that means you like, you know, cover up that piece of paper and like quiz yourself on what the information that's there, or being able to reproduce that through a mind map, or if you even just find a study buddy or a study group to kind of quiz each other on different concepts. I know I personally love to use flashcards. I use that all the time, even now. It's like helpful to create the flashcards. Like in that process, I am reviewing the information. And then 2, it's also helpful to test myself. Okay, did I actually actively retain this information?
Oh,
Pamela, I think you're also muted right now.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what's been happening. I'm so sorry. I think maybe when it moves slides, I don't know. Sorry. So what I was saying was that spaced repetition is one of the best ways to retain information. What this means is that, okay, I'm very guilty of this, but this means that you're not cramming. So spaced repetition means you're not leaving everything until the night before and then trying to memorize everything at once. It means studying something at a half hour, 1 day, 1 week interval. So meaning you're studying some material, you're revisiting it in a week and seeing how much of it you've retained and understood. So like Vanna was saying, using flashcards or even apps are really, really good ways to begin to do this. It also helps you to strengthen your long-term memory. So a lot of studies have shown that just reading something is not the best way to learn because what you end up remembering a week later, like this spaced repetition method, is so much lower than if you were to practice testing yourself. So using flashcards, quizzes, past exam papers. This is my one and only favorite method of studying is just to quiz myself constantly because it helps me to identify knowledge gaps and it reinforces what I thought I knew, but I definitely didn't. Because when I go back to regurgitate the information, I think that looking through past questions helps you to really actively act on the material and see, oh, do I really understand it? Or did I just understand what the meaning of that word was, but it's not put it into context and I don't understand it anymore. So that's why going through past exams is so crucial, for me at least.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I also think that using Anki, for example, is a really, really good software. I actually use it all the time now in school. I wish I'd known about it as a high schooler or an undergrad because it actually learns with you. So like you essentially go through flashcards and if you know it, you say, I know it really well, like with confidence, or if you don't know it super well, you hit again and the software is actually learning like, okay, like, she needs to see this card a couple more times before she feels confident about it. Or like the things that I'm feeling really good about, I won't see it again for a few days. So it's really all about that spaced repetition. Exactly as Pamela said, like you have to basically be doing that from the beginning, from the get-go, and not just waiting for like the 2 or 3 days before the exam. So just talking about optimizing learning. So it's same idea here, right? With interlude practice. So really mixing different topics and subjects within a study session. Because often you're going to be tested in like a mixed format. Even though like, especially in like some of your high school classes, maybe you're only getting tested on that material, like, just your biology material, just your history material. But like, as you progress into your college courses, and beyond, you're often going to get a mix of questions from different disciplines. And so it's going to force your brain to learn how to switch gears because you're going to need to use different parts of your brain essentially to approach certain questions, right? Like I have to do that kind of like switching all the time when I'm approaching one question about the heart, for example, versus like another question about the GI system, right? So like those kind of things can really help to build. It's really helpful to build those strategies now because you're going to be seeing a lot of that later on. And then when it comes to elaborative interrogation, so really asking why, right? So one of the things that is really important, and I know time is a limiting factor, but it's really important to delve deep into a subject. So especially if you find an interest in it, take the time to be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go find another research study about this topic that allows me to kind of delve deeper into why does this work the way that it does. And I think that not only just encourages a deeper understanding, but it also allows that information to like attach to something. So like, for example, if I'm learning about an abstract concept in a class, it's always so helpful for me to then find a research paper or a patient case study that then I can attach that information. Oh, like this is just like that patient that like came in with like diabetes and hypertension. They had this, and then we did this for them and it worked. And so really being able to attach that information to a tangible example that means something to you can also further help you build connections and synthesize that information.
I love that so much, Vanna. Thank you for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about being organized and creating study schedules and managing time efficiently. So like I was saying before, this is the not cramming at the last minute method. So you want to prioritize your tasks. So building a study schedule is really essential. And I think especially if you're a high schooler listening to this, time management is one of the most effective skills you can learn to get through the college process and beyond. And it's also really key to academic success. So one of the first things you want to do is prioritize your tasks. So what is really, really crucial? So what's urgent versus what's important? You want to rank your assignments, right? So which ones of these are important? And if you don't know, look at the study guide or the study rubric if one got provided to you, so that you're looking at the topics that are really, really important, and building yourself deadlines to ensure that you focus on the most critical tasks first. And so this avoids you doing any last minute rushes. I will say, I know that we're talking about the ideal. I was not the ideal student all throughout high school and college, I would say. And even medical school, I still didn't have the most ideal study habits. But I think that one of the things, you really can't get through med school, but I can attest to this, with being a last minute crammer. I think I definitely couldn't, because there's just so much information. So you really have to start early and focus on what's the most important or the most urgent first.
Awesome. And then also setting specific goals. So it's really important to set it's really easy to be like, okay, you know what, like this is what's on my to-do list. I'm going to get X, Y, and Z done, like chapters 1 through 5 done by the end of the week. And what's going to happen is you're going to realize, you know what, like maybe it took me a little bit longer to learn like chapter 1 versus chapter 2. And like, oh my God, I don't have this done by the end of the week. And then you're stressing about the fact that you're not where you thought you'd be. And like, I think it's really important to change those goals from like, oh, I'm going to get these kind of things done to, okay, I want to understand this concept and have it down and be able to teach someone this concept and talk about it with confidence by, you know, like, and not even giving yourself like a time bound limit, but more so like time blocking. So like I do this all the time where like, I might not get through everything I need to, but like, I'm going to work on like my research stuff from 2 to 4 p.m. And then whatever happens at 4 p.m., whether or not it's done, I need to move on and try and like move on to the next chapter or next topic or whatever it is I need to work on. And I think that's really helpful to then measure progress in the sense that like you can look back on your day and feel like accomplished that you know, oh, I did touch upon some of my research. I did make some headway on this topic. And I also was able to, you know, get this other extracurricular activity done. So I think that's a better way to kind of compartmentalize your time and your energy, as opposed to being like, oh my gosh, I need to like fulfill all the crazy expectations that we set for ourselves by the end of the week.
I love that so much, Vanna, because it helps you to not feel so overwhelmed. So another thing that I encountered a lot when I was studying was procrastination, because it just seemed like it was too much. So one way that I overcame that was to break it down. So if you work with us or other tutors, like when I was studying for the MCAT and the GRE, it was just a lot easier because when I approached the study portal, every single day I got told, okay, so this is what you should be focusing on. These are the exercises, the chapters, the questions that you'll be doing today. And it helped me to break down what seemed really unmanageable into chunks that I could just accomplish that day, like Vanna was saying. And so it helped me to get over the procrastination and feeling really overwhelmed, because when I sat down, I didn't have to think about it. I was like, okay, so I guess I'm reading this passage today and this is what I'll be doing. Same thing when I became a PhD student, was, you know, the process of writing a research paper, especially when it's very long, is incredibly overwhelming. So I would break it down into, okay, I'm going to work on the bibliography today. I'm working on editing another day, or outlining or drafting, or even doing the background research and the reading for it. So taking apart each of the steps and breaking it down helped me to see it as a really manageable task, because I was just focusing on a couple of things in the overall big picture. So working with a tutor or somebody, I think, can really help you to kind of maintain that progress and not feel so burdened.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always so much easier to tackle something when you kind of break it down into its pieces. I think that's really good advice. In terms of time management tips, using a planner, I literally would not survive without my planner. I use a planner, I use a Google Calendar, whatever you need to kind of keep track of everything. I even have like deadlines that have little alerts that, like, you know, I get an alert like, you know, 2 days before something is due, just because when there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of deadlines, a lot of things happening in life, we need those extra reminders, those extra pushes. And so I think that's really helpful. One of the things that we work on a lot, like, for example, if you were to work on like end-to-end application support with us, we create like what's called like a project tracker or a project timeline, where everything from the moment you start working with us to when you're applying to your colleges at the middle of senior year will be mapped out, and we'll have a timeline for you of when do you want to work on this supplement versus the next one, and by when do you want to have these done, when do you want to have a draft of your personal statement done, all that kind of stuff. So it's really helpful. While you always want to stay in the present moment, you also want to kind of keep the long game in mind, right? And keep the timeline in mind just to keep yourself in check. So a planner is really helpful for that. Using Google Calendar is great as well. Allocating time for breaks. So I use the Pomodoro method all the time. It's actually just it's such a good way to kind of keep your focus on a certain task, or even it allows you to kind of do the time blocking that I just mentioned. Maybe I don't have the time right now to get this big task done, but I have 3 emails I need to send. I can get that done in this 25-minute period. And then you're giving yourself a 5-minute break, as opposed to, having your phone next to you, getting work done, going on, your TikTok or social media, whatever it is that you do, and then coming back to your work again. And all of a sudden 3 hours have gone by and you've barely gotten through one thing, right? I know we've all been there. That's all happened. And it's totally fine for that to happen every once in a while. But I think the Pomodoro method really does help you kind of stay on track. I have a timer that's constantly on my laptop that I can just start and stop whenever needed. And it's just a really great way to kind of reward yourself too. I think that as humans, we're all looking for, seeking rewards at some point, especially after you've been studying for a long period of time. So after you do, you can change it based on how you want. For example, for me, if I have five periods of 25 minutes, I then get a 15-minute break instead of a 5-minute break. And it's always great because I'm also a huge snacker. So it's great for me to just, step away to my kitchen and eat something. So that's my favorite way to treat myself. So whatever works for you, you can always kind of adapt these, techniques and methods to match your style. And it really does prevent burnout, and it really does optimize your productivity, which I feel like we are constantly striving to do. In terms of balancing your activities, this is something that I talk about all the time with any of the students that I work with. But the best thing is to you want to work on being well-rounded, right? You really want to work on not just, it's always, academics are really important, of course, but it's also really important to feed those other sides of yourself, right? So really developing your personal character, developing your persona as a leader, right? All those things that happen through extracurricular activities or other passions that you may have, you really want to continue to feed those while also obviously getting your schoolwork done. I also think that there's so many times where, when I take a break from my schoolwork to do something that is more of a passion project, I'm able to come back to my schoolwork with more energy and more, more of a fresh mindset to actually be productive and get a lot done. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that your extracurriculars aren't necessarily a distraction, but they can actually really help you be a better student.
I love all of that advice. It's so brilliant. So we're going to go through some do's and don'ts for effective studying. So first, I think you want to find a space to study. I like not being at home, to be honest, because my fridge is there and so is my pantry, and I just walk way too many times into the. I think I'm just procrastinating. It's really what I'm doing when I do that. So you want to find somewhere kind of quiet or comfortable, or if you need white noise, in a cafe or something. But basically somewhere we can focus and be really productive. So our brain is actually really smart, and that we end up associating places with things that we learn, and also where we feel the most productive. So you might find that, why do I always gravitate to a cafe to study? Is that where I've been the most productive in the past? So your brain learns really quickly. This means, I'm in my study mode now. You want to stay organized. So meaning keeping your study notes, materials, and resources. So there's tons and tons and tons of software and apps to do that nowadays. There's everything from Notion, Everly, Google Drive, right, to use folders and binders and other organization apps. Brandon probably knows more about those than I do, but I'll let her chime in.
Yeah, there are a lot of apps now. I'm trying to think. I'm not a huge phone person, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. I also feel like there's always resource overload, right, with all the different apps. That being said, though, there are a lot of productivity apps too. Actually, I did used to use one in undergrad. I can't remember exactly. I want to say it was called like seed or something. It was basically like the amount, like it was kind of like the Pomodoro method where you would like study for like 25 minutes. And like during that time you were like planting trees. And it was like a funny incentive because like it would tell you like, oh my God, you planted like 6 trees. Like, and it would basically be tracking from like the moment you set your phone down to when you pick it back up again. And so it's just kind of like a good way to really, whether or not you use it consistently, it also just really helps you realize like, oh my gosh, like I do pick up my phone a lot when I'm like studying, or like, oh, I do take a lot of those snack breaks, or like, I'm just really trying to procrastinate. So I think it's like helpful to make yourself self-aware. I also think that like, this is definitely on a different note, but another app that I always recommend to people is Headspace. It is a great app for not just meditation. They used to be just like a meditation only app. You could do like a 3-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute meditation, but now they even have like stretch videos in there. Like, so you can take a little stretch break between studying. They even have like productivity videos. So like you start with like, a breathing exercise, and then it kind of gives you like, some study music, white noise in the background, and then you take a break to stretch. So it really does help you kind of like map out your day in that way. So I think that's also a really helpful app. And it also just helps manage your stress levels when you're in the midst of studying. Oftentimes we're procrastinating because we're stressed. So it's just a good way to kind of also build in some wellness and mindfulness into your study. And then getting into this is kind of a little bit what we've already talked about, but really staying positive and motivated, right? So giving yourself rewards, setting those short-term and long-term goals, really maintaining that enthusiasm is where a lot of that like endurance and perseverance comes from, right? So really being able to stay excited. So get excited about the little things, whether it's like the coffee that you make in the morning. I know that always gets me excited and gets me ready for like, a super productive day. And I just have to like keep that like routine like important. And so I think routine is really, really important to being productive. And I don't even like using the word productive because I think that means a lot of different things for different people. But like in order to like stay motivated and like get a lot accomplished or whatever you want to get accomplished that day, I think it's really important to have a routine. So whether that means like having a morning routine where you always make your bed, you always make your cup of coffee, and then you sit down for work, or maybe you start your day with movement, you go exercise or whatever it may be, and then you come back and work. Or like, I know some people know yourself best. Like if you think you work best at night, then really making sure that you optimize those hours. Or if you like always hit like a slump after like lunch, for example, which happens to so many of us, remembering to like then take that time to either take your mind off of it, watch a TV show, or go for a walk or something like that. So it's really, really important to create like study habits that fit your needs, and then really like making time to review your notes, right? Like I know you probably hear this all the time, like, oh, you don't want to start studying or cramming like 3 days before, but like genuinely you don't want to. You really do want to space out your studying. It will save yourself so much in the long term, and you'll realize that like when you cram, maybe you're able to perform on a test, right? Like a lot of people are like, oh, like I always cram like 3 days before and I'm still fine. That may be true, but then there's going to come a point where you actually need to retain that information for your job or for an internship or for your career, whatever it may be. And you're going to realize that if you cram right before an exam and you dump on the exam, you walk out and you've just like kind of lost everything, it's going to be really hard for you to then apply that in real life practice. So it's really, really important to like build up your knowledge and like really solidify it and not just study for an exam.
Got it. I'm feeling so positive and motivated after that even though I'm not studying, I'm feeling like I'm ready to tackle something huge, like my taxes. So there've been a lot of studies done at Stanford on avoiding multitasking. So one of the faculty members there has done a lot of work on, I know these days, a lot of students have grown up in the age of being multitaskers from the get-go, whereas I'm a little bit older, so that wasn't really the case. But one of the major downsides of multitasking is the cost of switching. So it's called task switching. So meaning you are a lot less productive when you've had to move away from whatever you're doing to getting on your phone and then going back. So the cost of going back to the task that was at hand is upwards of 30 minutes. So meaning if you were doing something for 20 minutes and then you're like, oh, I'm going to take a phone break, I'm going to go get on Instagram. the cost of coming back to that task is so much longer than it was if you didn't try to switch back and forth. So multitasking really reduces the quality and the efficiency of your work. It also hinders or impairs your ability to retain information over time, because what you're remembering is very scattered at that point. I know I've talked a lot about this. Actually, I'm like the queen crammer, so I feel really hypocritical talking about not cramming because I love to cram. But then I have also I've admitted that, during my PhD and then my MD, it was very hard to cram because there was just too much. There's too much information that had to be retained, and I couldn't get it all done at the last minute. So cramming is, take it from me, way less effective for long-term retention. It's very stressful. Because then, I pulled these all-nighters and they were terrible for my health and otherwise. So you really want to try to space out the information that you're trying to retain over time and so what I did was I set up regular study sessions with my classmates, and that really helped me a lot in terms of staying focused and staying on task and making sure that we're quizzing each other.
And I think I already touched upon this a little bit, so I won't bore you with it too much, but really eliminating distractions, right? So I always keep my phone on Do Not Disturb, for example. I even, just knowing myself and my lack of self-control, I sometimes keep my phone in a complete different room, which is very effective because I think it also makes you more self-aware if you're getting up to go and get your phone from a different room. And so I can go hours and hours at a time without looking at my phone, and it's great. But I had to learn, you know what, I have to keep it on Do Not Disturb. I also had to turn off notifications on my watch. It's so easy to just quickly, look at a notification, but then it kind of takes your brain somewhere else, right? I even had to work on turning off my email notifications at certain points. So if I'm gonna, use these next 2 hours to study this concept, I'm not gonna also in between be oh my gosh, let me get back to this email. Because I think that's another thing is as long as I get back to it, within a few hours, it's totally fine. It's not that urgent most of the time for me to get back to an email within 2 seconds. So it doesn't just apply to your social media and texting, but also applies to any other work-related distractions you could have. If you're trying to focus on one task, really focus on that one task. Not procrastinating. I think we talked about this one quite a lot, but also, I think when you use things like the Pomodoro method, that helps you to not procrastinate because then you are touching, even if you don't learn everything, on that first couple of days or whatever, at least you're touching a little bit on that class or that topic or whatever it is that you're working towards. So I think that's really important to recognize that a lot of the strategies that we talked about will then help you eliminate distractions and prevent you from procrastinating.
And that's where I hop in. So I have to highlight that even I am feeling incredibly motivated after hearing you two speak. Granted, I am not a student. However, I think what the beauty about this particular webinar is that so many of these tips are transferable, no matter what stage you are in, whether that's, whether you're a high school student, whether you're a college student, post-grad, MD, or in my case, in the work field, right? So I want to thank you both for all your knowledge tonight. I'd also love to open up the floor to question and answers, but before I do that, there is a QR code up on the screen, and I encourage our audience to pull out their phones, quickly scan it, and really book a time with one of our counselors. This is it'll be your one-on-one where you get to ask those questions that you still may have, whether that be about this particular topic or just ACTs, SATs, AP exams. I guess that one just happened. Whatever the topic may be, right? So we want to make sure that we give you that opportunity. So again, just pull out your phones and scan that QR code. And if by chance you're having any sort of trouble, please don't hesitate to reach out via email, and we'll make sure we get a time booked for you. Absolutely. Someone just said I wanted to ask about how to study for the ACTs. You know what? I am going to put in the chat a really great resource that we have on our website. It's all about the ACTs. So hopefully that'll help you there. And of course, we're here as well for that consultation. Give me one moment. Perfect. It's in the chat for our audience and our audience at home listening to this. I'll make sure that the resource gets included in the follow-up email. Again, I want to be mindful of time, so I think we only have time for about a question or two. So I'd love to open up the floor and ask you both what your number one tip is. I have a feeling that I know what you're going to say, but whether that's for parents, whether that's for students who are going through this process and are really struggling. And I think what's really important, and I'd love for you both of you to touch on this as well, I guess it's a side on social media and how, I don't want to say addicting, but how often we pull out our phones to scroll on social media and the impacts of that in terms of note-taking and studying. Either one of you can go first.
Rana, do you want to venture forth?
If you have an answer ready, go for it. I'm gonna think for another second.
I don't have a good answer. I'm very guilty of this. Every night I say to myself, do not open. Like, I try to close down all the apps, and then because it makes it harder to open it back up. Sometimes I do this like horribly self-addicting thing where I delete them all and then I re-download them. So I'm like the worst person to ask about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge part of it. I mean, I even I guess I have like a lot of like barriers in place knowing myself in some ways. So like, for example, like I don't have like my Netflix logged in on like my computer, and like I chronically forget the password anyway, so I legitimately cannot get in. So that is like something that I've set up for myself. I literally, like I said, I leave my phone in a completely separate room for the most part, and like it's always on do not disturb. I've like gotten a lot better about like putting my watch on do not disturb, so I think that's been a helpful way for me to like focus. I also think that like when you're actually passionate about what you're learning about, you actually get into it and allow yourself to get into it. I like don't even notice the time going by. So I think that's a huge one. I also like constantly like I'll like, I have like a little, what's it called, Alexa, right? Like I'll say, like Alexa, like set a timer for like 30 minutes or whatever. And I'll like, that will give me either 30 minutes to take a break or 30 minutes, like let me sit down and grind. And so I think it really helps, like the time blocking is like just a huge part of it. And then also like using the Pomodoro method, like allowing yourself to take those breaks and treat yourself is also really important.
I second all of those. I think time blocking is huge.
Yeah.
I'm a very obsessive time blocker.
I think it's the only way to get stuff done.
And do either of you sort of in the digital space, do either of you like time block on your Google calendars, or is it just something you physically manually write down?
For me, if it's not in my calendar, I'm not doing it. So,
correct.
So it's got to be in there. So even like when I take a break, like if I go to a workout class or I work out or something like that, like that's like in my calendar, because if it's not in there, I will come up with any excuse to not get it done.
I agree. I'm also that way. And I sign up for classes ahead of time because otherwise I don't get there. But everything's in the Google Calendar. So when app season begins and we get so busy, especially since my calendar is shared with students, I will block out time to shower because otherwise it just doesn't get done.
There you go. Let's see. I don't actually see any more questions in the chat, so I think this is a really great time to wrap up tonight's webinar. But thank you so much for joining us, and to our wonderful panelists, thank you so much for being here. Just keep an eye out on your email for more information about our programs, as well as with this recording. Our team of academic directors are here to help, and they are happy to meet with you and offer that free consultation and answer any more questions that you may have or questions that come up afterwards. Again, thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.